Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Couto, and on behalf of the entire communications team at Drummond, I'd like to thank you, all of you guys who are with us today for this webinar, How to Obtain Your Work Authorization as International Student, that we have Pedro Drummond, our partner, as mediator, and Henrique Tsukamoto, our Director of Tax, and Chris Costa, our Senior Immigration Attorney, as a speaker too. This webinar will be presented in English with simultaneous translation to Portuguese. I will take a brief moment to emphasize this message in Portuguese for our Brazilian audience, so that's clear to all participants. Então, pessoal, boa tarde. Rapidinho aqui falando em português com vocês. Para aqueles que preferirem acompanhar o webinar em português, em língua portuguesa, basta que vocês cliquem no canto inferior direito da tela de vocês, em um globinho que está escrito Interpretation ou Interpretação. Vocês fazendo isso, vocês vão ter acesso a um áudio em português, 100% traduzido do que falarmos aqui. Eu vou dar uns instantes para vocês entrarem. Quem puder dar um joinha que conseguiu, eu agradeço. So here we go, and last but not least, I ask kindly to everyone who is here to feel free to interact and send questions for our speakers through our Q&A. Good webinar for all of you. And Pedro, the floor is yours. Thank you again for this webinar with us.
Hello, guys. Hello, everyone. Lucas, thanks a lot for putting together this webinar. Thanks for the introduction. Today, I'm here with Chris Costa and Henrique Tsukamoto to speak about a very, very, very important topic on how to obtain work authorization, your work authorization for international students. So our target audience here are students looking to work legally in the US. And for a student, if you are a student, most likely that you are under the so-called F1 visa. And if you're a student and looking to work, you have two main topics on your mind, or at least you should have two topics. First, what you need to do in terms of immigration, what visa you should be looking for, what are the impacts. And Chris and I will be talking about this topic. The second topic, but not less important, is about taxation. You will learn from Henrique that under the F1 visa, you are, as a rule, exempt from U.S. tax, from U.S. taxation. You're not a U.S. tax resident. However, you will most likely become a U.S. tax resident in the future, or in some cases, you need to pay taxes in the U.S. anyway, especially because you'll be working in the U.S. So tax and immigration go hand in hand when we are talking to students. And that's why we have Henrique here to talk about tax, Chris to talk about immigration, okay? So let's get started. Henrique, how are you? Everything fine? Chris, just say hi to everyone there before we can get started.
Hey Pedro, thank you for the intro. Hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you guys. And again, feel free to ask any questions, especially when I explain about tax, because sometimes it's a little complicated and we're here to, explain as much as we can about this subject. Chris?
Pleasure to be here as well, and feel free to ask U.S. immigration questions.
Great. Guys, and I'm very honored to do this webinar with these two guys. They are, without a question, without a doubt, two of the best at Drummond. Henrique, how long have you been with us?
10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
10 years. Man, you were young when you came here. Huh? Chris, what about you? How long have you been with us?
3.5.
Wow, 3.5 already.
Getting there.
Yeah, you're getting there. Well, they are part of our elite team. Okay, that's the SWAT here talking to you guys. Thanks, Henrique. Thanks, Chris. So let's get started. The agenda is on the screen. I will not spend much time here. I will jump to the topics. Okay. Talking about us, here are some clients that we represent. We work for large corporations, small corporations, mid-sized corporations, and we do represent individuals as well. So what we do is we bring the quality that we provide to big clients, we bring to individuals as students, um, entrepreneurs, C-levels. Those are our clients, medical people from medical professions and so forth. Who we are, okay, just a little about German Advisors. We are in business for 14 years, and he is here with us for the past 10 years. So he saw us very little firm, now growing. We are about 300 professionals already in 5 different offices. We are in Boston, Miami, Orlando, São Paulo, and Belo Horizonte. Those are our physical locations. Henrique is talking from our Boston office today. Chris and I are in Miami office today. So you meet our team in all those 5 cities. We are specialized in cross-border transactions, particularly between Brazil and the US, but we serve all nationalities coming to the US, coming to do business in the US, individuals, corporations, and so forth. We have 3 main lines of businesses: tax, which Henrique is the tax director; accounting, where we have the CPAs, the so-called CPAs, certified public accountants; and legal. I am a licensed lawyer, licensed attorney in the US. Chris Costa as well. He's a licensed attorney in the US, more than a decade in experience in business immigration. Okay, so we combine several topics to better serve you. Okay, so let's get started. We'll be talking about immigration for students. Okay, at the end of the day, what you're looking for is to work legally in the US. Chris Costa, you're a very important man. You answer very important questions. Many people call the firm willing to talk to an attorney about what to do to work legally in the US. So the floor is yours. Please go ahead and answer that main question, but start with the details. Go ahead, man. Thank you.
Yeah, immigration, I guess, is usually the entry service. First, you obtain your visa, then establish your business, start working. Uh, so this form I-9 is required, as you know, maybe many people in the audience know, but required for anyone that's looking to begin working as an employee on payroll, receiving a W-2. So for international students, there might be some specific considerations, which we'll get into in the subsequent slides. So for international students, there are 2 pathways to legally work in the United States. The first is curricular practical training. The second is optional practical training. Both are in connection with one's program of study. Curricular practical training, I guess, is not technically like employment. It's kind of like maybe like a paid internship in a way. And it's during the program of study part-time, approved by the school, of course, which is required for both CPT and OPT. It has to be registered on the International Students I-20. So yeah, CPT, part-time, OPT, full-time or part-time technically, because you could do pre-completion OPT, but what we generally see is full-time OPT, typically after graduation. English as a second language programs are excluded, but bachelor's degrees, master's, professional certificates are all eligible for 1 year of OPT after graduation. And students enrolled in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math qualify for a 24-month extension. Again, CPT and OPT have to be authorized by the school. So, these might be things that you speak to the school about even before enrollment. Maybe as just general information to consider when considering admission.
Sounds good, Chris. Chris, let me talk about a little about STEM. Okay, so STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If you are within the STEM field, you have several advantages. Okay, one of which is the 24-month OPT extension, but that's not the only advantage. You have a huge advantage when you are talking about the EB2 national interest waiver green card. Okay, the EB2 national interest waiver green card is it's used a lot by students to obtain a green card because it is a self-petition. You do not need a sponsor to petition for a EB2 national interest waiver. But then within that petition, you need to discuss, we need to claim, we need to explain your so-called proposed endeavor in the US, okay? And for those people who are on the STEM field, the USCIS, which is the immigration agency in the US, already mentioned that the STEM field is a priority for the country. Okay, that doesn't mean your green card will be approved right away. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the government has said that STEM field is a priority. So you are one step ahead of the others. Okay. In other words, your chances increase. So if you're in STEM, thumbs up. If you are not STEM, don't cry. There are other avenues. You still have chances. If you are in the gray area, you don't know, ask your international, your student office at your college, at your university to double check whether your curriculum qualifies for STEM. Okay. Let's move forward. Chris, please.
So these are the specific documents that international students will need to complete Form I-9, to start employment in the United States. More typically required for OPT after graduation. So people that have been approved for employment authorization, which is a requirement for OPT, but not for CPT, because CPT is more like an internship, like I mentioned. These people will apply for employment authorization with USCIS. There's now the option to pay an additional fee to request premium processing, which helps. Since the time periods, I guess, are limited. So once receiving the employment authorization document and social security card, international students on OPT can complete their forms I-9 and begin working, be put on payroll, and be remunerated. And passport and Form I-94 are also required among the documents listed for the Form I-9. And your Form I-94 will be either issued electronically by Customs and Border Protection if you enter the United States in F1 status, or it would be evidenced through a USCIS approval notice if you changed status subsequent to entry in the United States in another status.
Good,
So
sounds
important to
good.
plan ahead, of course, because these documents might take a little time.
Okay. Chris, before we go into the petitioning, okay, how you petition for employment-based visas and etc. Let me pull up a question here from Carlos. So Carlos, here's his question. What are the restrictions for students to work during school in the US? Okay, let me get the very straight answer and rule. You cannot work in the US as an F1 holder unless you have a CPT or OPT. Okay, so very clear. What Chris just mentioned and what Chris just spoke about was the OPT and the CPT. If you do not have an OPT, if you do not have a CPT, as a rule, you cannot work in the US. Any other restrictions, Chris, that you would like to add? So the question was, what are the restrictions for students to work in the US?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that, as long as they're not on payroll, that they can work, they can have their own companies. Technically that's not allowed. Uh, you can maybe like work on a project that will become a company, once you have employment authorization, but technically it's not allowed. So students don't have open market employment authorization. Uh, all employment has to be approved by the school and registered on your I-20.
Okay, so let's move forward. How do you position yourself for a visa petition for a green card? How do I get out of OPT and CPT and move to a next level?
Yeah, so I guess this is maybe even more applicable for younger students, people that maybe came here for university and don't have previous employment experience. But in general, and we'll get to this in the subsequent slides, but in general, and more specifically for certain visa types, USCIS is going to want to see some evidence of industry recognition, particularly for your abilities visas. So the following are things that international students, should be trying to do regardless. And I guess like even any professional and in any field, we don't always do that, I guess, because we're busy, with our day-to-day work, but it's beneficial regardless. But for international students, even more so because these things relate to specific visa criteria, and having them will open doors. Not having them might close doors. So, here's a list that, I won't get into too much detail, but publish scholarly or industry articles, join selective professional associations and committees, peer review contributions, like journal submissions, conference papers, etc., participate in or judge competitions, uh, apply for academic, professional, or industry awards, present at conferences and panels. So, international students should always uh, try to look for these opportunities, try to interact with the broader industry in general. You can join professional associations as a student, often, for a reduced fee or maybe for free, depending, on the organization, of course, and your field. But, these are all things that will help. And, like everything with the immigration, it requires advanced planning. Uh, People that have the STEM extension have 3 years, to, I guess, resolve their immigration status, either on their own or through an employer. People that only have 1 year of OPT have, much less time. So it might be even more important to try to position themselves for, uh, a visa that will allow them to work more longer term in the United States.
That's good, Chris. Guys, you all know, or as a student in the US, you will hear a lot of people saying you need a sponsor for your visa. And that's the nightmare of every student, right? You need to find a employer to petition for your visa. And that is the rule. But there are a few exceptions, okay, where you can petition for yourself, the so-called self-petition. The three most important are EB5, which you need to invest at least $800,000. I've been a student and I know that we students don't have 800,000 as generally to invest. So EB5 is rarely an option. But there is EB1A and EB2 national interest waiver. Those two are self-petitions. You do not need a sponsor on EB1A and EB2 national interest waiver. Then those topics that Chris just mentioned are important topics for EB1A and EB2 national interest. So keep in mind to take those opportunities. You are building your career, which will pay off anyway, but you are also demonstrating to the US that you can qualify for EB1A or EB2 national interest waiver, which again are self-petitions. Okay. What else, Chris? What else? What other options usually international students have?
Yeah, so the following slides will be key temporary visas used by international students and key permanent residence options that international students might have. So these three are, the most applicable to international students. People of certain nationalities will have certain preferential visas, which aren't listed here, but those nationalities would be Canadian, Mexican, Australian, Chilean. But so here are the most applicable temporary visas. The L1, which is for intra-company transferees, people that previously worked for a multinational organization abroad for at least 1 year in an executive, managerial, or specialist position, and might have a job offer here in the United States. They would have had to work for that company for at least 1 year within the 3 years prior to entering the United States. So, might not work for a bachelor's degree, but maybe for a shorter master's degree program or, a professional certification. The O1 visa is for individuals of extraordinary ability in certain fields, including sciences, arts, education, business, also athletics. So there are certain criteria that the government looks for to see if people have sustained recognition of extraordinary ability in their field. And these criteria depend specifically on the criteria mentioned in the previous slide. So, good to know beforehand and, maybe either prepare or, just continue doing what you're doing, strengthening your profile. People in certain fields, maybe science, will have like an easier uh, pathway possibly because, they probably already publish academic research, review journal articles, things of that nature. A lot of the criteria are more geared towards like science and academics, but not necessarily. The key is to show industry recognition. You can be amazing at what you do, but there has to be some sort of criteria to, evaluate, who stands out from the field. And, these are the criteria that we have. Uh, the next is the standard option for international students, which is the H-1B visa. It requires at least a bachelor's degree related to the proposed job offer, requires company sponsorship. The O-1 visa, on the other hand, is a little more flexible. It's generally sponsored by a company, could be sponsored by a US agent in the case of somebody that's going to be a consultant, or even somebody's own startup, which is a relatively recent update to immigration policy, specifically
Let
to
me jump
facilitate
in,
that.
Chris, about startups because we have a question from David. How can startups work? His question, okay? How can startups work with international students during and after their studies in the US? There are several ways, but in general terms, how can startups obtain a work visa for a student in the US?
Mhm. So a startup can sponsor a student for OPT or CPT registered on the I-20. There does have to be a training plan and somebody other than the international student that, signs that training plan. But it is possible for OPT following graduation. There's more flexibility nowadays, and somebody can even be like self-employed or the head of the startup. Uh, that's fine. There's some parameters, so it's important to align that with your DSO. For the STEM extension, for the additional 2 years, though, there's uh, more of a requirement of having somebody else assign this training program, which is required for uh, optional practical training. And the startup can also sponsor the international student for a visa for the O1 visa, can enter the student in the H-1B visa. Like I mentioned, the government's relaxed the requirement or interpretation that uh, somebody with majority ownership of the company cannot have an employer-employee relationship with the company. Just, specifically to enable, high tech startups. But
That's
An
good.
important point is that the H-1B visa is lottery based because it has a specific cap of 85,000 and historically over 400,000 applicants. So it's more of like, I guess, a backup plan.
And just to remind guys, next week we will have a similar webinar, but focused on employers. Okay, so today we aim to talk to the students looking for jobs and what you student needs to comply with. Next week, we'll be talking to employers looking to hire. We have the compliance from the individuals. We're talking to the individuals now. Next week, we talk about the compliance for the companies. Okay, so keep that in mind. Keep an eye on your email. You will receive an invite for next week as well to cover this question on startups and other businesses. Um, Chris, what about the EBs? EB is always, whenever you see an EB, you think this is a green card. EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, EB5. So we have some options. Let's talk about the green cards. What are the options for a green card for a student?
Yeah, so these are the most applicable permanent residence options for international students. The first would be the EB2 National Interest Waiver. Uh, it's It allows for a self-petition. It's for people with a master's degree or bachelor's degree plus 5 years of progressive experience. Technically, it could also be for people with exceptional ability instead of a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience. You know, that, that's more on a case-by-case basis, though, noting that the government kind of, tightened their rules a little bit. But I'm assuming that, everyone we're speaking to here would have either a master's degree or a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of progressive experience. Uh, the most important part would actually be the person's proposed endeavor here in the United States. Uh, Currently, the government is prioritizing people that are well positioned to advance uh, emerging technologies, especially for certain critical industries. Uh, Basically anything involving AI, advanced manufacturing, advanced computing, is very well positioned for permanent residence. International students do have to prepare, I guess, a proposed endeavor that reflects specific goals and objectives, and maybe indicates where they're going to work. If they have a job offer, that would be great. Like I mentioned, the petition can be self-sponsored, but evidence of a job offer or prospects, in the case of a startup, would be beneficial. Next option would be the EB2 or EB3 perm. This is the standard employment-based green card pathway. It's employer sponsored. It requires a US company to test the local job market. It's very procedural, and there's a long process with the Department of Labor first. Only after passing through the Department of Labor can the employer proceed with the immigrant petition for permanent residence. This process would likely take over 3 years, so it's probably something that international students would do while on another temporary visa. Maybe they would initiate it during their OPT. Uh, you know, Maybe there would be enough time if they initiate it like right away, right after graduating. Like, the processing times are something to keep in mind, and it's something that we're going to mention in the subsequent slide. The last option, which is last, I guess, more because it's the most difficult, uh, but it's first in terms of preference. It's in the first category. Obviously, everyone would like to be in the first category, but it's the most difficult to uh, qualify for. It's either for people with extraordinary ability in certain fields, business, science, uh, athletics as well, education. Uh, Second option is for outstanding researchers, and the third option is for multinational executives. A little out of order there. Uh, so Yeah, these are all generally options for more advanced professionals. The multinational executive option, which is for executives or managers, is for people who previously worked for uh, a multinational organization within the 3 years prior to entry in the United States. That period holds if they started working on L1 status for the same company. So this would be the permanent version of uh, of the L1 visa that was previously mentioned. Uh,
Chris, no,
yes.
go ahead, please. Sorry.
No,
I
just
was
was
going to
gonna
jump
mention.
in.
Yeah, just was going to mention that the petition for outstanding researchers is popular now. Uh, so it's historically, I guess, kind of been, a little overlooked, but it's, something that uh, merits maybe consideration now.
I was going to jump in with a question here from Ernesto. Here's his question. How do I transition from a student visa to a green card? Okay, how do I transition from student visa to a green card? So we're talking about green cards here on this slide. Emerson, not sorry, Ernesto, the process of transitioning from student visa to a green card is called adjustment of status. Okay. So we petition your green card, but in addition to it, we petition the so-called adjustment of status. It's not mandatory to file the adjustment of status together with your green card petition. This can be done subsequently. In few cases, it's not even possible to to petition for the adjustment together with the green card. So it depends on the type of green cards. For example, the EB1A is so-called current, meaning I can petition your adjustment of status alongside the I-140, which is the EB1A petition. However, on the other hand, the EB2 national interest waiver is not current, which means I need to first obtain the approval of your green card and then petition for the adjustment of status. Okay, little procedural questions there, but important to clarify. Okay. Oh, visa bulletin processing time, a related topic. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so in general, I guess it's important to note that permanent visas have quotas as opposed to temporary visas, which in theory are unlimited. And quotas and processing times will likely dictate an international student's immigration status strategy, because oftentimes they might need a temporary visa to bridge the gap between, uh, you know, possible processing time for a permanent visa. Uh, and maybe the temporary visa would also be easier to qualify for, and they would need more time to build their profile to qualify for the permanent visa. So everyone can look up the visa bulletin. It's published monthly by the Department of State. It's going to show that the
But nobody
EB1.
will understand anyway. The visibility is very hard to understand, guys. You can check online, right, Chris? But it's hard to digest. Go ahead.
Yeah, in general, it's going to show that the first preference category is current for people of most nationalities, China, India, Mexico, excluded because there are caps. Only 7% of visas in each category can go to people of a certain nationality per year. But the first preference category is generally current. Historically has, usually been current. But then once you start working down, second and third preference categories, they're currently backlogged, depending on nationality, but there could be an additional wait of a year and a half, 2 years. So, that's an important consideration as well.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're jumping to tax residence. Let me answer a question here. I spoke about adjustment of status when I was answering a question. And now Rodrigo here in the audience sent a question that is related to adjustment, but on a different procedure, which is called change of status. Adjustment of status is not the same as change of status. Change of status is one visa to another visa. His example, his question is from F1 to H1B. Okay, Rodrigo, very good question, but your question has very specific points. Send us an email. We're happy to jump in a call and elaborate with you. In general terms, okay, just to give him a general sense, which is important to everyone involved. As a rule, when we petition for an adjustment of status or a change of status, you cannot leave the country. You need to remain in the country until your change of status or adjustment of status is so-called adjudicated, meaning it is analyzed. Okay, it's either denied or approved. So, in other words, in the meantime, during the process, you cannot leave the country. Okay. Rodrigo's questions has other topics. Send us an email. We're happy to jump in a call, explain you, and we can help you to navigate this moment of yours. Okay, guys, we close the immigration chapter and we open the tax chapter.
Those the fun parts
Basically,
now.
Enrique, how do I make sure the IRS does not knock on my door? Because
Yeah.
students don't want two agencies knocking on their doors, the IC and the IRS. The IC is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the IRS is the tax authority. We don't want those guys knocking on the doors of our clients. So,
That's
how
correct.
do I keep compliance with the IRS, with my
Perfect.
tax obligations under the F1
All
visa?
right. So
Please
yeah,
go
that's the
ahead.
fun
The floor
part. I
is
mean,
yours.
we don't want to pay tax. Nobody likes to pay tax, but we need to talk about it, guys,
Of
especially if you're
course.
an F1. There are some exemptions that we're gonna mention there and some rules which are very important for you, especially if you're thinking about one of these visas they were mentioning, and in becoming a green card holder in the future. You're gonna go through this. So, if you have the knowledge now, maybe you can plan ahead of time. So it's good if you're here listening to us and you're able to have this conversation already at this point in time. Okay. So some general rules which are very important for us to understand. Being a US tax resident doesn't mean that you can be from another country. I can be from Brazil, from Argentina, from somewhere in Europe, and I can be a US tax resident. Okay, so just to make that distinction, which is very important. And there are two ways that you can become a US tax resident. Okay, so first one, it is if you get your green card. So whenever you get your green card, you are already considered a US tax resident. Okay. And then the second one is what we call the SPT test or substantial presence test. Okay, so basically you have to do a little math on the past, 3 years. So you will count all the days in the current year. So let's say you are in 2025, you're going to count all days. And then 2024, you're going to count 1/3 of the days. And then 2023, you're going to count 1/6 of the days. So if you do this math and you sum all of these days and you have more than 180 to 83 days, which you were present in the US, you will also become a tax resident. Okay. What is the consequence of becoming a US tax resident is that you have to report global income to the IRS. So let's say I have, incomes in China, Japan, Brazil, Africa, Europe. I will have to report everything to the United States and offer a lot of those, incomes to taxation to the US Treasury. Okay? Now, Pedro, this is
Sure.
the good thing about, no, you can go to the next one,
Okay.
please. F1 students, okay? We're talking about exemptions, all right? So students, the benefit is that you're exempt from the substantial presence test for 5 calendar years. Okay? The benefit of this exemption is that you don't have to report global income to the IRS during these 5 years. However, that doesn't mean that you're not gonna pay any tax to the US. Okay? So if you are employed on CPT and you have wages, or maybe have some scholarship that you earn from room, board, and living. Those are not exempt from taxation. Okay, so you will pay tax in the United States, but only on U.S. source income. That's what we call these wages and scholarships or income that you earn while physically in the United States. Okay, but again, you don't have to report other sources of income that you have abroad outside the US. All right. Something that is very important as well is that during, as an F1 visa holder, you are exempt from Social Security and Medicare taxes. We call those FICA taxes. That's more or less 7.65% on your wages. Um, and is actually very common for certain employers to accidentally or because they don't know, they will withhold Social Security and Medicare from you. Okay? And then on this case, Pedro, if you can go to the next one, please. You can ask for a refund of FICA taxes. Okay, that's very common, and I have seen it many, many times. So the first thing you need to do if you see, so in the end of the year, you're gonna receive a form called Form W-2, okay, which will have all the wages that you have received from your employer in the year and all the taxes that were withheld from you. If you have Social Security and Medicare taxes withheld from you during the year, you have to contact your employer and try to ask for a reimbursement for those because you do not owe them. But if that doesn't work, then it gets a little bit more complicated. You have to, file with the IRS to claim for a refund, and then, file Form 843 and Form 8316 with all the supporting documentation, which will be the pay stubs and your W-2 saying, hey, my employer has withheld Social Security, Medicare taxes from me, so I would like to ask for a refund. So if you're, starting to get your CPT or your OPT and you have an employer, it's good to make this alignment on the first day. So then you don't have to deal with this like after, you know, the end of the tax year.
Good,
Next
Enrique,
one,
is
Pedro.
something very common. Clients come to us and say, "Oh, I'm a student, and a friend of mine said that because I'm under F, I do not need to pay tax in the US." Wrong.
Wrong, wrong.
Because you are in the, if you are F1 visa, you are not a tax resident. You are
Mhm,
exempt from the substantial presence test. That doesn't mean that you do not need to pay taxes in the US.
mhm,
Because, as Enrique said, in certain cases, you need to pay taxes in the US. Several, many, thousands, perhaps millions of non-residents in the US do pay tax in the US. Okay,
mhm.
you will file the so-called 1040 NR, which is non-resident, okay, and pay taxes, even though you are not US tax resident, okay?
That's correct.
In other words, please keep in mind the fact that you are not a US tax resident does not mean that you do not need to pay tax in the US. You need to check what are your source of income and ask yourself or ask specialists whether those source of income are taxable in the US. If so,
Perfect.
you file a tax return. Okay. There are several
Exactly.
examples of income taxable in the
Several,
US.
several, several very serious examples, actually, guys. So, sometimes people buy houses in the US on F1 because I had the money, I wanted to buy property, and then they're like, oh, I'm not gonna pay tax if I sell this property. Wrong.
Yeah. I'm a
Okay, so
partner in a company. I never been there. I don't work there. I'm a minority. I held a convertible note on it. They converted me to equity. Now they pay dividends to all partners, and I have 1% and I received money there. Yeah, that's taxable. Okay, you will need to report. And then you will need to figure out how much tax you have. Perhaps it was withheld, and then you need to ask for reimbursement from the US, from the IRS. Okay,
mhm,
several examples. Do not
exactly.
fall on the advice of your friend that said, oh, you are F1 holder, you do not need to pay tax in the US. Sometimes you do. Okay.
That's correct. That's correct.
Go
And
ahead, Enrique.
then, that's important also because people also say, oh, so I don't have to pay taxes, so I don't have to file anything with the IRS. So that's also a misconception. So even if you don't have US source income, you don't have wages, every year, in order for you to claim the exemption for the substantial presence test that we talked about, you have to file this form, Form 8843, okay, by June 15 of every year, saying, hey, I'm a student and I spent such like this number of days in the US for this year, and I would like to claim for the exemption. Because if you don't do that, then you fall into the substantial presence test. So that's very common. Usually, I mean, most universities they do have this conversation with international students, but it's very common that we see a lot of cases people miss this and they do not file the 8843. So, that's also just pay attention to that. Even if you're on F1, you do have an obligation with the IRS of filing Form 8843 if you did not have any wages or US source income. Now, if you did have US source income, then you're going to file the 8843, but you're also going to file Form 1040 NR, which is, the tax form for individuals, and then NRs because you're a non-resident. All right. So this is very important as well. People think they don't have to file anything, but no. Every year that you're here in F1, you have to file something. The difference is like which form and if you had wages and you have to pay taxes or no. Okay. And then also, if you're from a country that has a tax treaty with the US and you have reduced tax rates, you can also file Form 8233 if you had a treaty for the tax on wages. And also for certain scholarships, you might also have to file Form W8 together with the 1040 NR, also to claim a reduced rate on whatever scholarship you might be receiving. So those are also some specifics, but again, it's very important to have someone helping you out. I know that some universities they provide certain guidance, but if it gets a little bit complicated, it's good to look for a firm that can help you out with these findings. Okay,
Due dates. We're very
awesome.
close. I know you,
Yeah,
Enrique, is working
very close.
overtime. So tonight at midnight, people can call you, right? You're gonna be in the
Yeah,
office.
I'll be working most likely.
April 15 is right around the corner, so
Exactly,
can
exactly.
talk to us about deadlines.
Yeah, so due dates, guys. So for the 1040 NR, so basically in cases where you did have US wages or income, okay, you do have to file by April 15. You can ask for an extension for 6 months, but you do have to file the extension as well by April 15. Okay. The extension is just for sending the form, but if you do have to pay more taxes, these taxes they do need to be paid by April 15, okay? Otherwise, you're gonna get some interest and penalty if you file later and pay the remaining amount due later. So that's important as well. And then if you didn't have US income and you're just claiming the exemption from the substantial presence test, then you have until June 15 to file Form 8843. And that one, we don't have an extension, okay? So you need to file every year by June 15. And I think this year, I think it falls on a Sunday, June 15, so you have until June 16 actually. Okay, same applies for 15. These due dates when they fall on a weekend, you have the following business days to comply, okay, with the filings. All right, and then pretty quickly here about tax rates. This is a common question that we get from a lot of clients, like, oh, okay, so I'm an international student, how much tax I'm gonna pay on my wages? So you're gonna be taxed just like any other US citizen, US green card holder, individual on your wages. Okay, they are taxed as ordinary income according to this table for tax year 2024, which is the year that we are working on at the moment. So you see that they start at 10% and they can go up to 37% in federal taxes. Okay, so this is federal. And then Pedro, if you just move to the next one. You may also be liable for state taxes. Okay, so this vary by jurisdiction. Every state has its own rates and rules. And then just some examples, like if you're in Florida or Texas, those states do not tax individuals. However, New York and California, one of the highest, tax rates in the country. New York, you can pay up to 10.9% to the state. And then if you're in Manhattan, you still have the city tax rate, which can go up to 3.876. And then in California, it can go up to 14.4%. So again, in addition to that tax table for federal, certain states, you also have to pay the state tax, okay? And then just a reminder as well, these taxes, guys, if you're on W-2, if you're an employee, okay, they will be already estimated during, by your employer or their payroll provider, and they will be withheld from you during the year. Okay, so again, you're already paying those taxes, and I think maybe you don't know or you didn't know, but that's why usually, you negotiate a certain salary and you receive a little bit less. So taxes are already being withheld, but sometimes when you're preparing the return, you still might have a little difference because those are estimated tax payments. Okay, so when you file, you might have a refund or you might have to pay a little bit more. It depends on how much was withheld from you and how much, money you made in that year. Okay.
That's why you are filing a tax return, because you are hoping
Yes.
for a return.
Exactly. That's what everybody hopes for a refund in the end of the
Yeah,
year.
most of the time it doesn't come, right?
Yeah, a lot of the times it doesn't work like that. But anyways,
Guys, thanks, Enrique. Well, it's the last slide here, and
yeah.
we do have several very interesting questions. But before we go into the questions, here on the screen is my contact information. Okay, you can check my QR code. You can send me an email. You can add me on LinkedIn. I publish several posts on tax, corporate law in the US, immigration, so forth. So follow us and you will get up-to-date content on those topics. Here's Chris, his email, his LinkedIn as well. We are all very active on LinkedIn. In addition to Chris and Hick and I, the company itself, German Advisors, has a very active social media where we publish content that might be important to you guys. Here's Enrique, his email and LinkedIn as well. Tax guy, send him a message now, please, during the tax season. He's not working that hard anymore. So, right, Enrique put more workload on Enrique. Poor Enrique. He's working a lot because of the tax season. But by April 15, all is gone. Okay, we file all the tax returns. Here's the social media for the company. Okay, follow us. In addition to LinkedIn and Instagram, we also are on YouTube. Okay, and on YouTube, those webinars like these, they are on YouTube on several topics. So you will have the opportunity to learn more on other webinars that we record. And by the way, if you have a friend that wants to, or you think that friend should listen to this webinar, refer to our YouTube. It's going to be published on our YouTube, or if you missed anything during the presentation. Okay. Let's jump into the questions. We have 5 more minutes here, so I will try to get some questions here that are more general, so can help several others. A question here coming from Carolina. Henrique, that's for you. If my income is from sources outside of the US, do I need to file the form 1040-NR as well? I'm assuming here, Carolina, that the assumption on your question is, I'm not a tax resident and my income is from sources outside of the US. Because if you are a US tax resident, then all your sources outside the US are taxable in the US. Okay, so your question, the assumption is, I'm not a US tax resident, but my income, all my income is also from sources outside of the US. Do I need to file 1040-NR anyway, Henrique?
No, the 1040 NR, no. But if you're on F1 visa, you need to file the 8843 so that you can claim the exemption from the substantial presence test. So then you don't become a US resident for the days spent in the US. Okay, so that's the rationale. All right. So if you have no US income, US sourced income, and you're on F1, you will only file form 8843, okay, to claim this exemption.
Okay, good, good. Thanks. Chris, what's the best time to petition for a EAD, a work permit? Um, that comes from Samuel.
Mhm.
What's the best time of the year or during
So,
your studies?
so international students that are eligible for OPT would be applying for their work permit maybe soon after graduation or even before. That would really be aligned by the school. Depending on when they're eligible, when their I-20 already reflects, that they've been approved for OPT, and that's generally going to be the first time that an F1 student has employment authorization. Uh, at that's, soon after, I guess, receiving their employment authorization, they should already be thinking about the next steps. How long do I have an OPT? 1 year, 3 years? Is the STEM extension practical? Uh, do I have a potential sponsor? Am I eligible for a temporary visa? Based on maybe the options that we discussed, what can I do to maybe improve my profile? Uh, and, thinking long term about possible permanent residence as well.
Okay, sounds good. Samuel, as Chris mentioned, there are some time windows, okay? But here's my general advice to you and to all students and to everyone considering immigration to the US. Whenever your time window opens up, act quickly. Start working on your visa, on your green card petition. Do not waste time. Immigration and all immigration processes, they do take a long time. If you have decided to pursue that path, if your time window has been opened, do it. Okay? Do not waste any time. First, because the process itself will take a long time. Second, because you never know if the rules is going to change. Okay? If the rules are going to change in the future and you petitioned before, you will usually be grandfathered under the rules and regulations that you filed. Okay, so act quickly. Okay, and remember, lawyers, we do need some time to prepare your petition. You're not gonna knock on the door of a law firm and you will get out the next day with a visa petition. It's gonna take a while to prepare. So consider that time again and again. Bottom line here, act quickly if you have decided, if you made your mind that you are going to petition for a visa or a green card. Okay. Um, Chris, a question here coming from oh, Rodrigo. How uh, uh, how can I be certain? Okay, I'm rephrasing. How can I be certain that I comply with my CPT, the boundaries of my CPT? What can I do and what I cannot do under the CPT or OPT?
Mhm.
I will add that.
So the most important documentation that an international student is probably going to have regarding CPT or OPT would be their I-20, which really just lists the company that's registered, to provide this academic work, basically practical training. And in connection with the I-20, there would be a training plan that was issued to obtain the I-20. That training plan would identify like, general areas of practical training, manager that, would be responsible for, ensuring that the F1 student also, receives this training. So everything should be in line with those documents. And for CPT, it's also important to note that there's an hourly limit uh, of 20 hours per week. Uh, so students also shouldn't, go beyond that. And students, as we mentioned, also shouldn't engage in like consulting or their own ventures either.
And guys, very important to consult the international office of your college, your university, okay? The international office, the student office, and so forth. Why? Because they are the people that best understand your curriculum. Okay, they know your credits, they know the details about your course. Okay, there are several questions here, more specific questions related to fields of studies and etc. And I did reply to some, like I typed in to some referring to the international office. Okay, at the end of the day, the international office is the one communicating with the immigration for CPT or OPT. Okay, we lawyers will be engaged most likely and usually when you decide to pursue another business visa. Okay, the CPT and the OPT need to go through the international office. Okay, the international office will file all the paperwork for you. So keep in mind to ask them to obtain information, and they are usually in 99.9% of the colleges and universities. They are very, very responsive. Okay. Henrique, Chris, we are about to finish. Actually, we are past like 3 or 4 minutes already. Thank you very much. I think it was very, very helpful for those in the audience. I hope we provided enough information, important content to you guys. Chris and Henrique, thank you very much. Last words from you guys, and then we will go. Chris, please.
Yeah, but it was a pleasure. Feel free to reach out with any specific questions. We're happy to speak to you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Lucas. Also, he's out there helping us out, our communication team, and thank you everybody that was here. If you have any question, again, just like Chris said, just please reach out to us, okay? And we are here to help.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. You all have a great week. Thank you, Henrique. Thank you, Chris.
Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
Lucas. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.